Welcome, everyone, to Byte-Size Impressions. I'm Mike, and after a couple of head-scratching controversies, the Game Awards finally aired last week. Now, those controversies, for anyone that needs to catch up, had been Hogwarts Legacy's curious snubbing, and certain games being nominated for categories that just didn't make any sense. And by the way, on that note, I have no idea how Cyberpunk 2077 won Ongoing Game of the Year when it never should have been nominated for that category in the first place. Absolutely wild. Anyway, Jeff Keighley is being raked over the coals for making most of the event center around trailers and premieres. It seems that the awards themselves didn't even amount to 1/4 of the event's runtime, and to make things worse, the telltale music would play unreasonably fast, signaling award winners to walk off the stage no sooner than they began to give their thanks. Now, Jeff has already responded to this on Twitter. Quote, "By the way, I do agree that the music was played too fast for award winners this year, and I asked our team to relax that rule as the show went on. While no one was actually cut off, it's something to address going forward." Now, to be fair, I really think that Jeff was in a damned if I do, damned if I don't type situation here. Gamers certainly do care about seeing their favorite games represented and winning awards, but let's be honest here. They're mainly tuning in to see all sorts of surprises being dropped, and by that, I mean game reveals. If the awards offered all substance and no drip, people wouldn't tune in. If people didn't tune in, there wouldn't be any sponsors, and without sponsors, there would be no show. It's really that simple. That said, I do think that there needs to be better treatment of the winners, but the way everything went down, it didn't surprise me in the least, and I'm sort of shocked that it blindsided a lot of people on the internet. But anyway, the meat and potatoes of what I really want to discuss here today regards something that happened at the very beginning of the show. Chris Judge, the voice of Kratos in the most recent God of War games, took the stage to present the evening's first award, which was a shock to everyone, including myself, considering he led last year's show with an 8-minute acceptance speech. But that was all part of the gag this year, because as soon as Chris began to speak, the Get Off the Stage music began to play, and it was a good laugh all around. Chris said not to worry, he wasn't going to give an 8-minute speech like the last time, but interesting fact, his speech from last year was longer than this year's Call of Duty campaign. And, as a Call of Duty fan myself, you know what? It was hilarious. I'm in it for the multiplayer for sure, but I do tend to dabble in the single-player campaigns, and this year's was the shortest and least impressive campaign that the franchise has ever seen. But the salt is strong over at Activision because Call of Duty devs have taken to social media after the fact to express how upset they are by the ribbing. One said, "Honestly, as developers, we've heard way worse, but we don't expect it from a peer at an event that's supposed to be celebrating this year's achievements in gaming, especially with all the information that was leaked about its development." And by the way, what they mean by that is that there had been news that Modern Warfare 3 was only given like an 18-month development cycle. Anyway, I think that the first part of this anonymous developer's statement is fair. It's an award show, and everyone in that room should have been celebrating industry efforts all around. If you're nominated for something, you show up and you hope to win, and if you don't win, well, you applaud the success of everyone else who does win. But let's not pretend that peers in the industry can't criticize your work in general. That's really entitled thinking, especially when the peer in question isn't even a developer, but vocal talent. But it gets worse from there, as another dev has thrown this gem of a statement out for the public to consume. Funny, but yeah, the metrics that Call of Duty absolutely destroys all of the God of War games, probably combined, to be honest, is also equally laughable, if not more. And then another developer decided to comment on God of War's short user engagement once the game is consumed, and that Call of Duty can't relate because it doesn't have that problem. Now this, right here, is the height of idiocy, comically induced by the rubbing of salt. For all the cracks that people make about Call of Duty, no one is doing the first-person shooting game as well as they are. Point blank, Battlefield has been falling short every step of the way. Battlefront hasn't been doing it for people, and Titanfall 2's revival, while extremely welcome, isn't realistically going to command big numbers at this point. And Destiny 2, that's a game that can be very off-putting to newcomers or people in general who just don't have the time to invest in doing raids. But let's be clear here, okay? Sales alone are never, ever going to be a clear indicator of quality, period. And the fact that a developer of all people decided to use that as their foothold in the argument over which product is better, they should point blank feel embarrassed for themselves. If you ask most gamers if they'd rather see more annual installments of Call of Duty, especially now since they're seemingly willing to rush development cycles, or if they'd rather see single-player campaigns with great story, characters, and gameplay persevere, they are, more often than not, going to probably go for the latter. And again, I myself am a huge Call of Duty fan. I play it every year without fail. But if you put a gun to my head and force me to choose between online games as a service or strong single-player experiences, I'm going to choose single-player each and every time. Which is a great segue into my next point, which is knocking God of War for losing player engagement after they've beaten the game is one of those moments where I have to scratch my head and say, yeah, so? That's what happens when people finish the story of a game. They move on to the next thing. Sure, some people are going to stick around for New Game Plus, but this is just the nature of single-player games. That's how it works. So to flex about how Call of Duty does a better job at retaining players over the course of any given year, I mean, yeah, duh. It's a multiplayer experience that provides people with an opportunity to play for 5 minutes or 5 hours as they choose. It's a game as a service if there ever was one, with multiplayer modes aplenty, battle royale, battle passes, and seasonal events. These two things are not the same, and to draw that comparison at all is laughable at best. Don't get me wrong, with the very little that I've been able to play Modern Warfare 3 this year, I think it's a lot of fun. Well, the multiplayer package at least, but at the same time, it's also very clear that the developers at that studio aren't exactly willing to listen to criticisms about their own product because they keep doing what they're doing because it's making money, right? And with statements like the ones that they've just made, it's very clear they're obviously tone deaf. And if we ever needed more confirmation of that, we certainly have it now. Look, here's the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, and a message to the devs that are so butthurt over Chris Judge's joke. If you don't want these kinds of jokes thrown at you, then maybe strive for something more, for something better. I know. I get it. If the publisher says jump as a developer, you have to say how high, and I know that's how it works. But either learn to embrace some of the humility that comes with making a $70 full-price product that has lots of other additional added revenue streams on top of it that only features a 3-hour campaign, or hold on to your principles and find a new gig that you can be proud of. Or internally, maybe make a strong enough push to leadership to pay more attention to the final product. Take a year off if need be. You know, like you were supposed to with Modern Warfare 2. Do you remember that, Activision devs? Do you? That's what was said to be going on. That's what it was said was going to happen, but it didn't really turn out that way, did it? Anyway, still a Call of Duty fan, but I'm sorry. God of War 2018, God of War Ragnarok, really fun games. Were they perfect games? No. Were there certain things that they could have done a little better? Absolutely. But you give me those two games and say you're going to play these or you're going to play Call of Duty and that's it. I got to go for single player campaign games with story, with characters, with all the bells and whistles, with all the main content, the side content, so on and so forth. Activision, I know it sucked to have all of your hard work made fun of in front of everyone, in front of the world that was watching the Game Awards. But use that as a sign and not an excuse to just start tearing other people down. Do better.